Let's go to Tasmania now and catch up with Liberal Senator Claire Chandler in Hobart. Thanks for joining us, Claire. Tasmania was the first state to close its borders. Understandable, I suppose, more understandable for Tasmania given you're an island nation. But can you see that these border closures across the country are creating an enormous amount of human and social trouble now and strife, not to mention enormous economic damage?
Absolutely, Chris. I mean, you can't disagree with what my colleague Tony Passenger said around the impact that is being felt, particularly in some of these border towns across the country. This is having an impact on communities, and it is having an impact on economic activity across these communities when there are different rules depending on which side of a state boundary you might find yourself on, particularly in a situation where you're used to being able to cross over that boundary with absolute ease. Fortunately, not something that we have to deal with so much in Tasmania, having a moat as our border, as the locals have started referring to it. But yes, I can absolutely understand the devastation that's being felt in some of these communities.
But in Tasmania, no doubt more people are unemployed and you're suffering a lot of economic hardship because people can't go there for holidays. We've just gone too far, haven't we? In this country, we should be accepting of certain levels of infection of this disease and dealing with it. Perhaps looking around New South Wales being the model where you're contact tracing and isolating outbreaks when they occur, but trying to get life back to something close to normal. But we've got South Australia, Tasmania, Queensland, Western Australia. State premiers almost seem to see that it's a matter of political pride keeping every infection away.
Well, I absolutely agree, Chris. We do need to be trying to get back to normal as quickly as possible, and that means relaxing border restrictions when it's appropriate to do so. I mean, we've said right from the start of this, the best way for businesses to be able to operate as they were before is for the conditions to be set in which they can operate as they have before. The effects of this virus are being felt across the country, and as we are, working through discovering more about coronavirus, how it impacts people, how it's transmitted within the community, I think we as an Australian community need to learn to an extent how to live with this virus and understand what that means for business. But certainly in Tasmania, we are seeing some fantastic local support for our business community down here, which I've been very glad to see. And speaking with businesses across the electorate down here, they've all been really happy at the level of support that local Tasmanians are providing to them.
But what's national about the way the National Cabinet is behaving?
Oh, look, that is a matter for the National Cabinet, and I know that they will be meeting tomorrow, and I'm sure state leaders and the Prime Minister will have more to say coming out of National Cabinet tomorrow.
Hey, just briefly, Claire, we've spoken before. You've been a strong advocate for women in sport, especially when they're coming up against perhaps transgender opponents. Rugby Australia will have to act given a new scientific study which shows, unsurprisingly, that transgender opponents can be dangerous to the women they're competing against.
They certainly shall, Chris. This is a big choice for Rugby Australia to make. They have an opportunity to decide that inclusivity is one thing, but detriment to women on the sporting field, on the rugby field, in terms of safety and in terms of the fairness of the field that they are playing their sport on is more important in this situation. And I certainly hope that Rugby Australia will act on the advice of World Rugby around the report and the research that they've developed, which shows these clear disparities in strength and stamina for women on the playing field when they are playing against trans women. There is a 20 to 30% greater likelihood that a woman will be injured when she's tackled by a trans woman who is biologically male on the sporting field. So I've written to Rugby Australia urging them to look very carefully at this research that World Rugby has issued and take a stand for women in Australia who play rugby, who want to play rugby in a safe environment.
Now, Claire, the pictures we ran while you were speaking, you wouldn't have seen them. They were of Aussie rules, but I know as a Tasmanian you would agree with me. It's a far superior game and dealing with similar issues.
Absolutely. And look, I think regardless of what Rugby Australia does in this situation, other contact sports, or all other sports across Australia, but particularly contact sports, need to be looking at the research that World Rugby has produced and considering whether they are going to tread down this path of inclusivity, of allowing trans women to play against female players in a situation where there is a significant risk of those female players being injured.
Spot on, Claire. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Chris.